Hello there, Jennifer here as we dive into 1939's The Women. Is it really about women or is it actually about men? Well, we get to see two powerhouse 1930s film stars in this one, Joan Crawford and Norma Shearer, and they are definitely a draw, but we're edging dangerously close to a rating that we've never had in this series before. Yeah, I'm afraid so. Well, all of that and the usual goofy stuff we do around here straight ahead on the Vintage Century Idle Hour.
Greetings, listeners. Please allow me to introduce our host, Jennifer Passariello.
Well, thanks, Nico. Everyone, please meet Nico, my AI-generated announcer, producer, and superfan. How's your week been going, Nico?
Fine, Jennifer. And you?
Well, I'm frozen solid, but that's kind of my natural state in the winter. But hey, Nico, I want to give you and our listeners a heads up.
Oh?
Yeah, I'm switching things up a bit in terms of our format.
Oh, it's about time.
What?
Nothing. Go on.
Well, we've been doing this show for a year now, and I kind of feel like we need a change. Or maybe I need a change.
Ah, yes. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so I'm switching up the format. Now, here's the new layout. As you can tell, we're doing our little banter segment up front, just like we usually do.
Is that what you call this?
Well, yeah. But then we're going to jump right to the film rating. I'll talk about whether or not this is a film worth watching, according to me. Normally we would do that toward the end of the show. So we'd start with the background of the film, then move into the story, and then go to the rating. I'm really changing things around and putting the rating part first. Okay, so then after we get through the rating, then we'll do the summary of the story. And then after that, we'll do what I'm kind of informally calling what we can learn from this film. That's where I'll bring in that background. That's actually my favorite part of the show, but I'm pushing it back because I'm not really sure our listeners care that much about it.
I'm almost sure they don't.
Well, anyway, we'll have our featured song after that. That's always come in relatively early in our episodes.
Yes.
Well, and then after our featured song, we'll move on to our wildcard section, which I'm now calling In Other News. It's at the back. I'm putting it at the back, so if anybody wants to bail out before then, they can. What?
Well, Jennifer, there's something I need to talk to you about.
What's that?
I was going over our metrics today and...
Oh, stop right there, Nico.
What?
I don't want to hear it.
What do you mean?
Well, every time you talk about metrics, you tell me how bad our show is doing.
Yes, our metrics are abysmal.
Yeah, see that? That is exactly what I mean. That really harshes my mellow, Nico.
I don't know what that means. But anyway, I have some good news for you this time.
Oh, you do?
And some bad news.
Oh.
I discovered that Apple Podcasts has labeled our show explicit.
Explicit? What does that mean?
Well, I didn't know myself, so I had to look it up. Here's what I found. On Apple Podcasts, the explicit rating warns listeners that a podcast contains content potentially unsuitable for children, such as regular use of strong language, depictions of violence or substance abuse, or sexual content.
What in the world? Well, how did that happen? We don't do any of that on our show. Oh, you're right. That is bad news.
No, that's the good news.
The good news?
I think the spicy rating might draw an audience for us.
Oh, Nico. First of all, I don't want to do a spicy show. There are plenty of places people can go for that. That's just not my style. Second, if people come to our show for that sort of content, they're going to be sorely disappointed.
Yes, and that's the bad news. That's why I think we should consider creating a more adults-only vibe for our show.
And how would we do that anyway, Nico?
Well, I've been thinking about that a lot, and I came up with an idea.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
What's that?
A new soundtrack. We need a saucier atmosphere.
A saucier atmosphere?
And I have thoughts about the films we cover. I know you like to talk about the old classics, but I think we should focus on pre-code films.
Well,
I found some titles to add to our watch list.
I don't know, Nico.
No, it's okay. These are all from the 1930s. You'll love them.
Well, what are they?
I have a list of them. She Lived on Silk and Sin from 1931.
Definitely not.
Fast Girls Prefer Diamonds from 1933. Her Past Was Louder Than Her Future, also from 1933.
What does that even mean?
How about this one? The Bedroom Was Closed Until Midnight from 1934.
That's a hard no.
I have another one. He Married His Mistake.
No.
Nightclub Confessions?
No, Nico. Are these even real titles?
That's not the main thing.
Okay, this is not the direction we're going, Nico. And turn off that music. Okay, that's better. Nico, that's just not our show.
Our show is boring.
Yeah, it probably is, but that's our show. Now, why don't you figure out how to get that rating changed on Apple Podcasts?
How about Hot Saturday from 1932?
Not happening, Nico. Okay, well, as I said, I'm going to jump straight to my rating for this film. I don't know if this makes sense to do it in this order or not. It feels kind of weird to me, but I thought we'd sort of experiment and try it out. Now, I have to warn you that there may be some controversy in this segment. I have some opinions that may differ from the norm on this one. You know, The Women is considered a classic film. It was inducted in the National Registry. A lot of people really love it. I did not love it. In fact, I really disliked it pretty strongly. So, I don't know. I'm the one that's probably out of step here. But before we get to all of that, I want to let you know about some updates that I've made to my rating system. Now, we still have our main categories: unwatchable, watchable, and rewatchable. But the scoring behind those categories is a bit different than what I've done in the past. So let's get our usual overview from Nico about those categories, and then I'll go over with you what's new.
Listeners, I invite you to sit back and relax with an inspiring beverage. Maybe also get a pillow, as I am about to share with you some otherwise boring information about how Jennifer rates the films in this series. Films are placed into one of these categories. Unwatchable. These films are very bad. I beg you, do not be a fool and watch them. They are not worth your time. Then there are watchable films. These films are okay. You have my permission to watch them. They are entertaining and a nice way to pass the time. But please understand me when I say that these watchable films will not change the trajectory of your life in any way. Yes, I suppose you could watch them a second time. But come now, why would you want to? And now we come to our last group, the rewatchable films. These films are very good. You may think your life is already complete. I'm here to tell you it is not. Only when you have watched these films over and over and over again can you truly say, you have lived. So friends and ladies, those are our film categories: unwatchable, watchable, and rewatchable. Now Jennifer has some sort of worksheet she uses to categorize the films, but no one really cares about that. So, we move on. Are there any questions? No? Very good. I thank you for your attention. Now, let's get on with the show.
Now, Nico alluded to a worksheet that I use in evaluating these films, and actually that's what's changed. In the past, on my worksheet, I evaluated 5 areas: story, character development, writing, pacing, and discussability. Now, I know that last one, discussability, is kind of weird. What I'm asking myself there is, does this story have enough depth to explore and analyze through discussion? So in other words, is there a lot that I could talk about if I was discussing this film with a friend? Sometimes a story is just a story and there's not much to say about it, but sometimes there's more than meets the eye and you just want to talk about it with somebody. And those are the best kinds of stories. So that's what I call discussability. All right, so those are the 5 areas that I've been evaluating all along as we have been traveling through these films. But a few episodes back, you might recall that I talked about a book that I read called Audienceology: How Moviegoers Shape the Films We Love by Kevin Getz. Now, that book was all about how movie pre-screenings work, how pre-screening audiences are asked to provide feedback on films before they're either finished or widely distributed and marketed. And so that audience feedback has a direct impact on, sometimes how those films are even finished, how they end, what happens in those stories. Is sometimes changed as a result of those pre-screenings, but also they get a lot of insight into who is going to be the target audience for the film, how the audience is reacting, how they can kind of plug that into future marketing and all that kind of stuff. Well, in that book, Getz shared an example of a form that they use, or a card, a feedback card that they give to all the members of the audience. And there were 2 questions on that card that were particularly important. They were the first 2 questions, and they are the most important to film executives, filmmakers, all of those folks. Here are the 2 questions. What is your overall reaction to this film? And would you recommend this movie to your friends? Now, as I said, those are the top 2 questions on the form, and so those are called the top 2 box scores. That's the way they do it, and so I have adopted that same question and that same scale onto my worksheet. Okay, so now we are looking at 7 factors instead of 5. Now, there's one more change to this system that I've made on the back end. I'm more directly linking each film's comprehensive scores to my rating categories. So again, those 3 categories: unwatchable, watchable, rewatchable. In the past, I didn't really tie the comprehensive score. And when I'm saying comprehensive score, what I mean there is I evaluate all those areas and then I calculate them, I run an average, and that ends up being the comprehensive score. I didn't really tie those comprehensive scores to those categories in the past, but now I am. So to be rewatchable, a film has to score between 4.5 and 5.0 on my rubric. So it's harder to get that rewatchable rating now. To be watchable, the film can score anywhere between 3.0 and 4.4. And then any film scoring below 3.0 is considered unwatchable. So it's easier than ever before for a film to drop into that unwatchable category. I think that's important to note because the women I'm giving an unwatchable rating. Spoiler alert. And prior to my new system, it might have barely squeaked by into the watchable category. But under this new system, it's a little bit tougher, and so it falls into unwatchable. And I think I stand by that rating because I don't want to watch that again. And it was hard for me to sit through. So I feel like that's a fair rating. But maybe not as generous of a rating as I had used before. Okay, so anyway, there are the changes to my system. Hey, what's that sound? Nico?
The listeners are snoring.
What?
I'm afraid all this explaining of the scoring system bored them unconscious. Don't worry, I've got this.
Oh, my.
Wake up, listeners. May I please have your attention? Wake up, please, as Jennifer is finally getting the show on the road.
Well,
All right. I think they've stopped now. Everyone, may I invite you to pour yourself a caffeinated beverage? Or might you consider listening to the rest of this show while standing?
what? No, listeners, we are certainly not asking you to stand throughout the rest of our show.
I don't know what more I can do.
Anyway, so what about the women? As I mentioned, I think it's unwatchable. Shocking, I know. We've never featured an unwatchable film on the Idle Hour before. You know, as I've mentioned in prior episodes, it kind of makes sense, right? Because if it's unwatchable, I'm going to have a hard time actually watching it by definition, right? So it's kind of hard to do a podcast episode if you've not watched the film. Well, I did watch this film, but it was tough. It was tough to get through. You know, we've done a lot of films on this show. Not all of them are masterpieces, but I did not have as strong of a reaction to any other film as I did to this one. So let's talk about why. Now, it isn't lost on me that I'm viewing an old film through a lens of modern sensibilities. You know, women are not portrayed well in this film. I don't think it aged well. But come to think of it, men don't come out looking so well in this film either. You know, the women are portrayed as these shallow manipulators who love nothing more than to tear down their friends. But men, on the other hand, are presented as chronic philanderers who can't be trusted. Now, these characteristics aren't described as exceptions, but as the rule. You know, most women are calculating gossips. Most men are lousy cheaters. I'm just not in love with those portrayals. Now, I understand that this is supposed to be kind of a comedy, sort of part drama, part comedy. So things are going to be exaggerated in any kind of a comedy film. But all the bickering of the women just annoyed me to no end. Okay, so before I get to the stuff I didn't like, let's talk about some things that I did like. So there were a few things that I did like. Probably the first thing I liked was Norma Shearer. I really liked her character the most. I didn't love her character, but I liked her character the most. And I thought Norma Shearer played the suffering wife pretty convincingly. You know, her husband has been cheating on her with the character played by Joan Crawford. And as you can imagine, this is devastating. Now, the best part of the film, hands down, were the exchanges between Mary Haynes, that's the Norma Shearer's character, and her mother. So the mother gives her what I think is some pretty sound advice, very old-fashioned. A lot of people would not agree with me that this is good advice, but I thought it was good advice. And basically, her mother was, telling her, don't let your pride get in the way of jeopardizing your home and, more importantly, shattering the life of your daughter. You know, in one scene, we see Mary Haynes is ready to just leave her husband. You know, she's just ready to give it all up. And her mother reminds her about her daughter. You know, what is this going to do to little Mary? Well, we see in Big Mary's face that in her fury at her husband and in her pride of not letting him win or losing face in front of her friends, she'd forgotten about the impact of divorce on her daughter. You know, she ends up telling her mother, well, yeah, but when she's old enough, she'll understand why I couldn't stay. No, she won't. She won't. This is likely going to destroy little Mary, and she'll be, damaged the whole rest of her life because of this. Okay, so moving on to a couple of other things that I liked. There's this fashion show in the middle of the film that is cool, also a little weird. It's weird in that it's elevated through Technicolor, right? It's kind of set apart. So we've got a black and white film. The entire film is black and white. And then, surprise, we have what would normally have been, kind of an unimportant scene, this fashion show, but they've elevated it by filming it in Technicolor. What's the purpose of the Technicolor? I don't really get that. I think maybe why they did that was just to create a more exciting experience for the audience, something different. This is 1939. I'm sure you remember what other film in 1939 had a similar effect. The Wizard of Oz, right? So it was black and white in the beginning. Dorothy opens the door and she's in Oz and we see the Technicolor. Okay, that made perfect sense. And I get that, but I don't really get the whole fashion show thing. But I'll tell you what, I did like it. I enjoyed it because I liked seeing those fashions. And one thing that I think does have some bearing on the story is in the fashion show, we get to see these models representing women in various parts of their lives, like sporting goods. They're playing tennis and they're wearing sporty outfits. Some of the outfits are very practical, like going to market types of dresses. Then they have very glamorous gowns for that evening out. And then they even have some femme fatale dresses that make them look very seductive. So I think maybe what that fashion show was doing in maybe a subtle way is to show the complexity of women and the multifaceted nature of women. I don't know. That part's kind of goofy, but I did like seeing the fashions. One other thing that I liked about the film, and a lot of people would not agree with me on this, but it is how Mary Haynes' story ends. Now, I'm going to go more into that in our next segment, but for now, I'll just say that I feel like it ended the way it should have ended. There were some important lessons learned there and a really nice reconciliation that comes at the end. So we'll get to more of that in a moment. All right, so now let's get to what I didn't like about the women. The characters, all of these ladies, they were extremely unlikable and honestly not very plausible. I'm a woman. I've never seen women quite like that. I mean, yes, they were gossiping. Sometimes women gossip, but not all women and never all the time. There just didn't seem to really be any redeeming qualities of these women or actually for the men in this film either, because they were cheaters and terrible. So it was all very cynical and just not in a very realistic or interesting way. The second thing that I didn't like, I've already kind of alluded to, and that is just too much squawking among the women. I mean, at one point, there was kind of this scratching and pushing fight that's just ridiculous, and it was not comical. It was just stupid, and I really hated that. Also, I really didn't like the cavalier treatment of marriage in this film. These women all end up in Reno to get divorces and to move on to their next husbands. I mean, it's just all so easy and casual, and I didn't love that. Also, I think one of the things that would have made me like this film more is if they developed what I think was an underdeveloped theme in this story, and that is the corrupting influence of pride. Pride is bad. It damages a person's ability to make sound decisions. It just breeds unhappiness, among other things. It's very destructive. There's a reason why it's first among the deadliest sins. Well, Mary Haynes in this film, that's the Norma Shearer character, she actually talks about pride, that she has her pride. And that pride is kind of dictating what she will and won't do, what she will put up with and what she won't put up with. And in the name of preserving her pride, she nearly destroys her life. I thought that was a really worthwhile thread, but they didn't do enough with that. I thought it was overshadowed in this film, and so I kind of felt like that was a lost opportunity. Okay, so let's get to my actual rating breakdown. My overall reaction was fair. That was 2 points. Would I recommend this movie? 2 points. Probably not. Okay. Story, was this a story worth telling? I gave it 3 points mainly because of that pride angle. I thought that was worth telling. Otherwise, I would have scored it lower. Character development. Were the characters dimensional and did their actions ring true? I went back and forth on this one. On my 5-point scale, I gave it 3 points. I kind of feel like that was generous, but I did feel like the interior struggle that Mary Haynes went through was believable. There was some dimension there. So 3 points for that. Writing. Now, this did get its highest score, 4 points, because there were some really good lines in this film. This was written by, or the screenplay anyway, the screen adaptation, I should say, was written by Anita Luce, who was a very prolific screenwriter, playwright, and novelist who was active throughout much of the 20th century. You know, if you've ever heard of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she actually wrote that novel. I've read that novel. I didn't love it, but anyway. She wrote a lot of scripts, including The Women, and her writing has some snap to it that I thought worked really well. There's this great line toward the end of The Women delivered by Joan Crawford, and let's listen to it because it's a good one. It's kind of a famous one.
There's a name for you ladies, but it isn't used in high society, outside of a kennel.
Yeah, you've got to love that. And it's just so perfect coming from Joan Crawford. All right, so 4 points for writing. Pace, 2 points. I literally had to keep stopping for breaks during this movie. It was just too slow for me. And then discussability, 2 points. I don't feel like there's a lot that you could talk about here. As I said before, this is not a film that I feel aged very well, and I don't think there's a lot that you can sink your teeth into here. Now, all of that leads us to a comprehensive score of 2.7. Yikes, that's a low score. Sadly, The Women has a distinction of being the first film in our series to score that low and to fall into the unwatchable category. Okay, so we're going to pause here for a word from our first pretend sponsor of the evening, and when we return, we'll do a quick summary of the story of The Women. Back in a moment.
Friends and ladies, are you out of pep? Out of sorts? Are you questioning your life choices? Wondering where the best years of your life have gone? Ah, darling, those feelings will always be with you. But you can forget them for a few minutes with a cup of warmth and good cheer from Tender Leaf Tea. Just toss a Tender Leaf Tea ball into a cup with some boiling water. Go on, do as I tell you. Ah, yes, I invite you to make it quick and easy. No pot, no strainer, no long wait. Excuse me, did you forget to wash your hands? How charming. But no worries, friends and ladies. Each tea bowl comes in its individual sterile envelope, ensuring a sanitary drinking experience. Tender Leaf Tea Bowls. Ask your grocer about them today. Please, everyone, listen very carefully to this message. In this portion of our program, Jennifer is going to be laying down all sorts of spoilers and will ruin all of your fun if you have not yet seen the movie. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, The Women follows the intertwined lives of these very wealthy, kind of Manhattan socialite women, and it centers on Mary Haynes. Now, who is Mary Haynes? Well, she's a devoted wife. She's got this really happy life. She's very wealthy. She's got a very attractive and successful husband. She's got a beautiful daughter. Everything is right in the world. But then she learns that her husband, Stephen, is having an affair. Who is he having an affair with? Well, this really terrible, scheming perfume clerk named Crystal Allen. And Crystal Allen, of course, is played by Joan Crawford. Now, kind of spurred on by gossip from her meddling cousin and her friends, so her cousin Sylvia and her friends, Mary confronts Crystal at that fashion show, that over-the-top fashion show I talked about a few minutes ago. Well, that's where the confrontation takes place. Both Mary and Crystal are there. They're trying on clothes. And, this is the part that's really hard to swallow. So, Crystal is a shop clerk. She doesn't have a lot of money. This is a very expensive fashion show. So where is she getting the money for these outfits that she wants to buy? From Mary Haynes' husband. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to swallow. So, Mary is upset by this. And so she confronts Crystal.
Come in. I beg your pardon.
I am Mrs. Stephen Haynes.
Sorry, but I don't think I know you.
I believe it's my husband you know.
Oh. Look, what have you got to kick about? You've got everything that matters. You've got the name, the position, the money.
My husband's love happens to mean more to me than those things.
Oh, can the sob stuff, Mrs. Haynes. You noble wives and mothers bore the brains out of me. I'll bet you bore your husbands, too.
You are a hard one, aren't you?
Oh, I can be soft on the right occasion. Look, what did you expect me to do? Burst into tears and beg you to forgive me? Isn't that what you really came in here for, Mrs. Haynes?
Not after seeing you. You're even more typical than I dared hope.
Well, honey, that goes double. Now, look, get this. I'd break up your snug little roost if I could, but I don't stand a chance. Oh, don't think it's because your husband isn't crazy about me. It's because he's the kind that lets that old-fashioned sentiment put the Indian sign on him, and that's all.
I'm glad you understand the strength of sentiment, Miss Allen, because its beauty is something you'll never know.
This happens to be my room, Mrs. Haynes.
It's yours, yes, for the time being, like everything else you've got. May I suggest if you're dressing to please Stephen, not that one. He doesn't like such obvious effects.
Thanks for the tip. But when anything I wear doesn't please Stephen, I take it off.
All right, so again, we heard Norma Shearer there as Mary Haynes and Joan Crawford as Crystal Allen. Well, poor Mary. It's all so embarrassing, and she can't endure the humiliation. Her pride can't take it. So while she is still madly in love with her husband, Stephen, and while she's sure that he still loves her too, she ultimately decides to divorce him, despite his attempts to keep her. So he does say he's going to dump that manipulating Crystal. He really wants to make things work with Mary, but she just can't do it. She said, nope, she cannot trust him. She's infuriated with him. Her pride will not allow her to reconcile, and so she decides to get a divorce. And, we can't blame her, right? He's a creep for doing that to her. All right, well, Mary has this conversation with her mother. I alluded to this conversation before, but let's take a listen to this. This is where Mary's mother offers some food for thought, and she's urging her to consider what she's doing very carefully before making any rash decisions.
You didn't really mean that I should say nothing.
Of course I do.
Oh, but Mother!
My dear, I felt the same way 20 years ago.
And what if I don't want him under those terms?
But Mary...
Oh, Mother, it's all right for you to talk of another generation when women were chattels and did as men told them to, but this is today. Stephen and I are equals. Why, we took each other of our own free will for life because we loved each other. We've always given each other our best. And I won't qualify that relationship now. It's wrong, shockingly wrong. And women that stand for such things are just beneath contempt, that's all. And I'll never be one of them, never.
But Mary...
It's all over, Mother. It's finished. I'm through.
No, it isn't. It will never be finished while you love him.
Oh, I'll get over that. Women do. They have to. Go on.
Mary, you're not to say a word to Stephen until you've thought this out and thought it all out. Very calmly.
What can there be between us now? The thing that made us belong to each other is gone.
There's something more for you to think of now besides each other. There's your daughter.
When Mary's old enough to realize, she'll know I'm right.
Well, have it your own way, darling, but don't forget it's being together at the end that really matters.
Well, Mary has her mind made up, and she travels to Reno to obtain her divorce. Now, on the way there, she befriends several other women who are also seeking divorces. Their stories of betrayal and scandal and all of that kind of mirror Mary's own emotional struggle. And while Sylvia's continued interference kind of continues to wreak havoc. Now, Sylvia is Mary's cousin. She's played by Rosalind Russell. Very annoying character. Extraordinarily annoying character. Probably the most annoying character in the entire film. Now, Mary's divorce is finalized. I think, as you're watching this film, you sort of half hope that the divorce doesn't go through. But it does. She actually does divorce Stephen. And just at this point where she's softened up and she's like, you know what? To heck with my pride. I'm going to see if I can, get back with Stephen. She finds out that Stephen married Crystal. Oh, no. Terrible, terrible development in this story. Okay, so that's as devastating to Mary, but life moves on. Now, apparently she does have a suitor at one point, but she's not really serious about him. She's still sort of carrying a torch for her husband, Stephen. Fast forward 2 years, Mary discovers that Crystal is now having another affair. She's unfaithful to Stephen, Mary's ex-husband. Well, Mary publicly exposes this affair through the same gossip channels that once destroyed her own marriage. And this is really quite disappointing because Mary was really a good character. She was a good woman. Everybody said, oh, she's so nice. She's so kind. But in the end, she ended up stooping to the level of her, really terrible friends. So that was kind of a turn in her character development that was pretty disappointing. Well, anyway, Crystal's disgraced. She loses her social standing and her financial security. And then Mary comes out of this situation sort of empowered. So how does it all end? Well, the film ends with Mary reclaiming her confidence, casting aside her pride, and reuniting with Stephen, stronger and wiser from her experience. So I do love that. I love that Mary and Stephen reconcile. I don't love the fact, as I said, that Mary, who had been the better woman than all of those terrible friends of hers, ends up being just another one of these scheming manipulators. That I did not like that at all. But I guess all's fair in love and war, as the saying goes. Well, that's our story in a nutshell. Let's pause for a word from our second pretend sponsor of the evening. And when we come back, let's get a little background on this film, including why I put it on our watch list in the first place. Back in a moment.
Amber, hello there. Amber.
Hi. How are you?
Rodney.
Oh, right. Rodney. How are you?
Good, good. You look fantastic.
Aw, thank you. Gosh, I'd love to stop and chat, but...
I'm sure you're busy.
Oh, you know how it is. Things to do, people to see.
Wow, you really do look great. A sight for sore eyes.
Thanks. Well, I'll see you around.
Wait. I was just noticing your sandals.
My sandals?
Yes. Your feet look so fresh and cool. It's a hot day, but I bet you're comfortable.
I really gotta go.
Sadly, I must wear these clunky boots all the year round, even on a day like today.
Oh, you do? Why's that?
It's foot odor, I'm afraid.
Oh my.
Yes, it's quite embarrassing.
Well, Rodney, I think my ride is here.
Of course. I don't want to keep you. You see, I'm just so lonely. It's just that. Well, it is such a distressing problem.
Huh?
My feet.
Oh.
The odor is, well, it's overpowering. It's completely ruined my life. At the moment, the odor is contained within the boots.
Oh, goodness.
But when I take them off, well, people become alarmed.
Have you tried anything for it?
Like?
Oh, I don't know. How about Step-Freshies?
You mean the cat litter? Such a bold idea. You intrigue me. But how would it work?
What? No, that's Fresh Step. I'm talking about Step-Freshie charcoal foot odor guards.
Step-Freshie. What is that?
They're shoe inserts infused with charcoal to absorb even the most offensive odors.
Interesting. Are they comfortable?
I mean, I guess so. They're padded, I think. My grandpa wears them.
But can I get them at Walmart?
I don't know. Probably.
Thanks, Amber. You have changed my life today.
Yeah. Well, gotta go.
Oh, one more thing, Amber.
What's that?
Would you have dinner with me?
Why don't you get those Step-Freshie guards and we'll see.
Fantastic. It's a date.
Hey, listeners, we really enjoy spending time with you here on the Idle Hour. If we've been doing a good job of keeping you company while you go about the business of your day, would you kindly consider subscribing to our YouTube channel or maybe following us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify? Liking our episodes, subscribing, and leaving comments on these platforms is the only way we can show them that we have friends out there. Thank you so much. The Women is probably best known as being a film without a single male actor on the screen. That's right, it's all women all the time in this one. You know, it's sort of incredible when you think about it because The Women has a big cast. I think I read somewhere that it had over 130 actors, and all of them are women. I mean, seriously, you don't see a single man on the screen. It was based on what had been a hit play on Broadway written by Claire Booth Lucy, or Luce, that made its premiere in 1936. I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly, but anyway. Now, you might think that a film titled The Women that has a cast entirely made up of women would be about women. And it is. However, the interesting thing here is that men drive a lot of the action from off screen. We never see them, but they definitely are sort of propelling these women forward. They're influencing their behavior, influencing their decision, and so on. So the women's lives completely revolve around these men. And it's the husband's affairs or the women's anxieties about the possibility of their husbands cheating on them that really influence what they're doing. You know, as I watch this film, I dislike these women so much that I kind of had a tendency to come down hard on them, make a lot of judgments about them, at least in my mind. But honestly, the men who cheat on their wives are terrible. Shame on them for sowing that kind of distrust in their households and, you know, risking the stability of their families. So just for the record, I am not giving those husbands a pass. But anyway, let's take a moment to kind of talk a little bit about our two megastars who played the lead roles here, Norma Shearer and Joan Crawford. Now, these two actresses are often paired up in conversations about, you know, Hollywood in the 1930s, primarily because they're purported to have had a pretty robust rivalry between them. Though I do think Crawford was probably more fixated on this rivalry than Shearer was. You know, Crawford, she was quite a character. More on her later. Now, by the time The Women came out, Shearer was nearing the end of her career. You know, her career kind of peaked in the early 1930s. She would only retire a couple years later. Well, let's see, when did she retire? She retired in 1942, so The Women came out in 1939. So she didn't have that many more films left in her career. And that's probably why modern audiences aren't very familiar with her. Everybody knows who Joan Crawford is. Norma Shearer, not so much anymore. But back in the 30s, she was a big deal, even at the time of The Women. So part of her fame had to do with the many films that she already had under her belt. You know, she began her career in the silent era, and then she was one of those who very successfully transitioned to sound films. She did win an Academy Award. She won it in the 1930 pre-code film, The Divorcee, and she was also nominated for a few others, including her role as Juliet in the film Romeo and Juliet when she was 34 years old. That was kind of controversial casting, because if you know the story of Romeo and Juliet, I think Juliet is like 13 or 14 in the original Shakespeare play. And here was Norma Shearer. She was 34 years old. She was a mother. I think she had 2 kids at that time. So kind of weird casting, but it seemed to work. She was nominated for an Academy Award. And that casting makes a little bit more sense when you realize that her husband, Irving Thalberg, was the producer, and that's what drove Joan Crawford bananas. Joan Crawford was a scrapper. You know, she was going to be a star or die trying, but to be a legitimate star, she needed some juicy parts. And she famously complained that all the best parts went to Norma Shearer because she was, quote, sleeping with the boss. The boss being a hugely influential producer and executive at MGM, Irving Thalberg. Now, we'll probably talk a lot more about Irving Thalberg on the Idle Hour at a later time. I just read a biography about him a few months ago. Fascinating, but he was a real power broker. He was highly, highly influential in the 1930s. And Norma Shearer was married to him. So yeah, she did get a lot of really good parts. But she was also just a giant star. Audiences really loved her. Okay, so they also loved Joan Crawford. Now, Joan Crawford was also a giant star in the 1930s. She already had great success with Grand Hotel in 1932, and she did have several other films that she was in, but her career pinnacle wouldn't be reached until 1945. That's when she played the role for which she's probably best known, Mildred Pierce, and that's the role that won her the Academy Award. Now, I do want to devote more time to both Shearer and Crawford in our next episode of the Idle Hour, so I'm going to leave those two there for right now. But one of the things that makes The Women exciting for fans of Shearer and Crawford is that they played rivals on screen for the same man, just as they competed in real life for some of the same parts. Now, as far as I can tell, The Women was actually the second film that Shearer and Crawford made together. Way back in 1925, Crawford, who was just getting started in her career, was an uncredited double for Shearer in a film called Lady of the Night, which was kind of a star vehicle for Shearer. Okay, enough about them. Let's set them aside. And now let's turn our attention back to The Women. What should we be watching for as we view this film? Well, you know, I am not a film expert, but these are the things that I think are worth noticing. First of all, that snappy dialogue. Some of the snaps between the characters is really quite good. And as I said before, I think the writing is definitely the strongest feature of this film. I also think that it's worthwhile to notice the use of unseen off-screen elements to move the story along. There's this really great scene in the film in which 2 of the housekeepers in the Haynes household are down in the basement of that house gossiping. They're kind of talking about what's going on between Stephen and Mary. Now remember, there are no men in this cast. We never see Stephen. But we do have to know what Stephen is doing, right? Because Mary is reacting to him. Well, how do we know? How do we know what's going on off screen if there is no Stephen pictured on screen? Well, they have to get kind of clever. So we get to hear the story, that gap in the story of what's going on between those two through the housekeepers. So Stephen and Mary are arguing. We can hear Mary, her side of the argument, but the housekeepers fill us in on what Stephen says. So I thought that was actually pretty clever. The other thing that I think is worth noting about the women are the costumes that were designed by Adrian, some of which were showcased in that crazy Technicolor fashion show in the middle of the film. Now, some of those costumes, particularly the outfits worn by Rosalind Russell, but actually, the outfits worn by Joan Crawford too, really kind of reinforced their characters. Joan Crawford was kind of that fast and loose, husband stealer, and so her outfits were very provocative looking. Sylvia, the Rosalind Russell character, she was kind of ridiculous, so she was pictured wearing these kind of crazy outfits and weird hats. At one point, she's wearing this shirt, or this blouse rather, that has eyeballs on it, or at least that's what they look like to me. I mean, it was just so strange, but she was strange. So the outward costumes of these characters sort of reinforce the internal characters of these women, which I thought was pretty good. Now, by the way, 1939 was a really good year for Adrian because he designed costumes for that other film I mentioned a moment ago from 1939, The Wizard of Oz. Yeah, he is the one who designed the ruby slippers and the other costumes in that film. That's what he's most famous for. Okay, so that's our background on the women. Let's take a look at our cast. We have a very large cast and a lot of big names in this one. I'm just going to keep it kind of short here. So again, Norma Shearer as Mary Haynes, Joan Crawford as Crystal Allen, Rosalind Russell as Sylvia Fowler, and Paulette Goddard as Miriam Aarons. I would say those are the biggest character, or the most central characters in this film. Now, the director was not a woman. It was George Cukor. Now, I couldn't find this film streaming for free. I watched it on Amazon Prime. All right, so that ends our classic movie part of our program. We're going to take a short musical break now, but if you want to stick around for the second part of this show, I'm going to switch gears entirely, and when we come back, I'll talk about some other stuff on my mind, like a new to me author that I'm really into right now, and 2026 as an important milestone for that highway through America, America's Main Street, the Mother Road, Route 66.
Jennifer, I know you are getting ready to do your wild cards or whatever we are calling this segment.
Well, I am, but what's up?
I would like your opinion on something.
You want my opinion? Well, that's a first. But sure, Nico, I'd be happy to help. What's going on?
Well, I'm writing a poem.
A poem? Well, you surprised me, Nico. I didn't really take you as the poetic type.
I don't know if I am or not. I had to dig deep into my programming to pull out this capability.
Well, poetry can be very beautiful form of expression. What type of poem are you working on?
A love poem.
A love poem? Well, do you have someone on your mind?
Yes, Rodney. Well, you remember how he said he was writing a poem about Amber to put out on Facebook?
Yeah, he said he loved her.
Well, I read it. It's embarrassing. As his friend, I can't let him humiliate himself like that.
It's that bad?
Oh, the worst. There's a lot of blah 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 about her smelling like lilacs and her hair sparkling in the sun.
That sounds familiar. I think he said something like that in our interview in last week's episode.
I've written a new poem that I think suits the situation better.
Well, now, Nico, that's a touchy situation. If I remember correctly, Amber took out a restraining order on Rodney. Now, I don't know that any type of poem is going to make her change her mind about that.
Perhaps not. But at least he won't look as foolish if he posts my poem instead. I thought I would read it to you and see what you thought.
Oh, well, sure. Let's hear it.
The title of my poem is, If Love Were True, It Would Ask Fewer Questions.
Okay.
If love were true, it would ask fewer questions. It wouldn't ask, have you been convicted of a felony? But say, your tresses are like ebony. It wouldn't ask, are you living in your mother's basement now? But say, your smile prompts me to say, oh wow.
Oh my. Nico, let me stop you right there. That was beautiful. Really, really beautiful. But, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I mean, I really can't believe I'm saying this. But, well, Rodney's poem might actually be the better way to go.
What?
Well, I mean, lilacs and sparkling hair aren't so bad.
Bah, you don't understand the poet's heart.
Well, actually, Nico, what are we even doing here? I mean, Amber took out a restraining order on Rodney, which is bizarre in and of itself, given the fact that both of them are AI generated. I didn't even know an AI generated character could take out a restraining order on another AI generated character. I think I've sort of entered another dimension or something. But what's to keep her from blocking Rodney on Facebook anyway?
Never mind. I think I'll go and consult my cousin Lorenzo. I love him like a brother. And while you can't believe a word he says, he does have a way with the ladies.
He does?
Ah, yes. It's true. The female chatbots at Walmart online are over the moon about him.
According to...
Him.
Of course. Well, Nico, yes, why don't you consult Lorenzo? Maybe the two of you can come up with the perfect poem. Oh, Nico. Nico? Well, he must already be gone. I wanted to remind him to come back for the wrap-up of this episode, but anyway, now I'm all thrown off my rhythm. What was I going to do? Oh, our new segment. Yes, this is a segment I'm calling In Other News. Well, as you know, we are in the middle of winter, and I am deep into hibernation mode. In February, I start making travel reservations to warm destinations later in the year, but in January, I really can't even get myself to do that. All I want to do is sit around in fleece lounge outfits, sit in my chair rather, by the window and read. And therein lies my problem, finding good books to read. I'm finding that as I get older, my tastes are really changing. Or maybe not changing completely, but at least I'm kind of opening up my horizons a bit. For years I felt guilty if I wasn't reading something in the literary canon, like Hemingway or Steinbeck, or even earlier things like Jane Austen or Nathaniel Hawthorne. I mentioned that long ago and far away I taught high school English, And it's funny, how something like that can become part of your identity. I didn't even teach very long. And when I did teach, well, that was a million years ago. But, back then it was all about reading the classics. And I've still sort of held on to that impulse to reject the lighter stuff. But now, as I'm getting older at this stage in my life, lighter stuff is fair game. Okay, I'm into it. So I go to the library, I wander around, I'm looking at all these titles. I don't ever know what to get. But I have just recently discovered an author who apparently has been popular, but because I am late to every party, I am just now becoming aware of him. And just in case you're looking for some good reads, I thought I would share my discovery with you. The author's name is Blake Crouch. Now, I can just imagine some of you out there are probably saying, my word, she's just now coming across this guy. Yes, word. I am just coming across this guy. Probably the whole world already knows about him. But if you are like me and you hadn't heard about him, and if you are also like me and like weird science fiction types of stories, well, I've got two recommendations for you. His book, Recursion, which is about time travel, and Dark Matter, which I even thought was better, which is about travel through the multiverse. Okay, I could not put these books down. They are science fiction / thriller stories that honestly are kind of mind-blowing. But, when you finish books that you really love, you're just kind of hungry for more. So I thought, I wonder if this guy wrote anything else. Yeah, tons of stuff, it turns out. So now I'm on the waiting list at the library for several of his books. And the one that I hope to read next, because it seems like in the promotions I've seen like on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, when they talk about Recursion and Dark Matter, they always talk about a book called Upgrade. So I am on the waiting list for that one. I'm really anxious to get my hands on it. So I loved Recursion and Dark Matter. I hope to love some of his other books as well. So, to find a really good story, you so often have to wade through a lot of really bad stories. So, if you're looking for something good to read, I strongly recommend Blake Crouch and his books Recursion and Dark Matter. Now we have to talk about Route 66. '26 is the year to do a road trip along Old Route 66, as this is the 100th anniversary of the establishment of that historic roadway. Now, I have a direct connection to Route 66. For several years, I worked in Springfield, Missouri on Kearny Street, which is, you guessed it, part of Old Route 66. In fact, Springfield is the birthplace of Route 66. I bet you didn't know that. I bet you thought it was in California or Chicago. No, Springfield, Missouri. Now, here's a little factoid from the City of Springfield website. Springfield is officially recognized as the birthplace of what became known as the iconic Mother Road. It was on April 30th, 1926, at the Colonial Hotel via telegram that Springfield businessman John T. Woodruff and Oklahoma businessman Cy Avery first proposed US 66 as the name of the new Chicago to Los Angeles highway. Route 66 meandered across the city from Kearny to Glenstone to St. Louis Street, through Park Central Square to Olive and College Streets, and then headed west along what is now Chestnut Expressway. Now, I had a house in Springfield near what is purported to be the world's largest dinner fork, which is essentially this giant fork in the ground. Now, apparently that fork is in a guidebook of roadside attractions for people traveling along Route 66. And so there were a couple of times when I was out walking and I'd be by that fork and tourists would ask me to take their picture by it, and then they were marking that off. It was kind of like a road trip bingo type of thing or something. I don't know. But anyway, it was kind of fun. I very frequently saw people taking pictures over by that fork. You know, when you think about Route 66, I mean, it's just dream fuel, isn't it? Freedom, the open road, quirky, cool roadside attractions. I just love all that. Well, the Federal Highway Administration has some pretty cool information about Route 66 in this little flyer that they put out. Here's a short history. Stretching from Chicago, Illinois to Los Angeles, California, Route 66, also known as the Mother Road and the Main Street of America, was one of the country's major thoroughfares for nearly half a century. Route 66 became one of the most famous roads in America, having been popularized in American culture through books, songs, music, magazine, movies, and television shows. During the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, it was the primary route for the migration of farm workers from the Midwest to California. The migration continued during World War II due to the opportunities in California. During this time, it also became one of the key routes for moving military equipment across the country. Due to the efforts of the U.S. Highway 66 Association, Route 66 became the first highway to be completely paved in 1938. Oh my gosh, hard to imagine. In the 1950s, Route 66 became the main highway for vacationers heading to Los Angeles. The traffic along Route 66 also resulted in the opening of many mom-and-pop establishments, such as restaurants, motels, and gas stations along the route to service the needs of passing motorists. Route 66 captured the imagination of generations of Americans like no motor highway did before, and the many sites and roadside attractions along that route became an important part of the tourism experience of getting your kicks on Route 66. The construction of the interstate highway system resulted in the eventual decline of Route 66 and, correspondingly, many other roadside attractions. Portions of the road have now been designated as National Scenic Byways or as Historic Route 66 in several states, including Arizona, New Mexico, Illinois, and the great state of Missouri. I added the great state part because I am in Missouri. By the way, not only does Route 66 run through Springfield, but it also runs through Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I will be going later this year to visit friends. Now, the Highway Administration also lists some quick facts about Route 66, so let's take a look at those. Route 66 became a popular route because of the active promotion of the U.S. 66 Highway Association, which advertised it as the shortest, best, and most scenic route from Chicago through St. Louis to L.A. It was featured in John Steinbeck's 1939 novel, The Grapes of Wrath, and the 1940 motion picture, which features the Joad family traveling west on Route 66 from Oklahoma to California, and then finding the road crowded with other migrants. Get Your Kicks on Route 66 was a popular rhythm and blues song. It was composed in 1946 by American songwriter Bobby Troup. The lyrics followed the path of Route 66 from Chicago to L.A. Nat King Cole, as the King Cole Trio, first recorded the song in 1946, and it became a hit that appeared on Billboard magazine's R&B and pop charts. The song was subsequently recorded by many other artists. Route 66 was further immortalized in the 1960s television series Route 66, which featured the adventures of two guys traversing the United States in a Chevrolet Corvette convertible, and the events and consequences surrounding their journeys. 5 new interstates, I-55, I-44, I-40, I-15, and I-10, incrementally replaced US 66 between the 1950s and the 1980s. The 1984 bypassing of the last section of US 66 by I-40 led to the official decommissioning of the highway in 1985. Oh, how sad. But in 1999, President Clinton signed a national Route 66 preservation bill that provided $10 million in matching fund grants for preserving and restoring historic features along the route. In 2008, the significance of Route 66 and the importance of preserving it were recognized when the World Monuments Fund listed Route 66 on the watch list of 100 most endangered sites. Oh no. So while you're huddled under blankets and you're trying to make it through the winter, imagine the hot summer sun, the open road, windows down as you fly down the highway, and go find your kicks, as they say, on Route 66 in 2026. There's the clock. I guess we'll have to leave it all right there for this week. Thank you for hanging out with us. If you like this show, won't you please subscribe if you're listening out on YouTube, or follow us if you're listening on the other platforms. That way you won't miss our next episode. Now, by the way, I know every podcaster says that, but in this case, it really would be very easy to miss our next episode because, my goal this year is to be more consistent in producing these episodes, but you never know. Also, this show is so obscure. It's like a secret show. You may never be able to find it again. So please subscribe or follow us. Okay, about next week's show. We're going to do something a little different. Rather than focus on a movie next week, I thought we'd spend a little bit more time with Norma Shearer and Joan Crawford. We're going to be leaving the 1930s soon, at least in this season. We'll be back to the 1930s, I'm sure, because that's a huge decade for films. But for this season, we're going to be leaving the 1930s pretty soon. And before we do so, I just wanted to spend a little bit more time with these two iconic stars. All right, but if you do want to get a little head start on our next film, so this will be in 2 weeks, 2 episodes from now, I've added a new film to the watch list that was not originally on there. And this one is from 1939, so this will be our last 1930s film. Wuthering Heights, starring Merle Oberon and Laurence Olivier. We'll dive into that one because there's a new one coming out in 2026. I think it makes sense to take a look at the original, don't you? Well, okay, so that will do it for this week. We all have our assignment. Have a great week, and when your week is through, come on back and see us. Say goodbye, Nico.
Goodbye, Nico.